What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the On the Bubble podcast. I'm Anthony Chiu. It's currently December 2nd. I'm recording this. Got lots to get into. We're going to recap a loaded feast week. Going to preview this week's games, another loaded week of games, and then go over some teams that have caught my eye so far this season, for better and for worse. Let's get into it. We have a lot to get into. So during this feast week, I'm going to start off with the Players Era Festival. A bit of a controversial MTE, multi-team event. So lots of people on Twitter, either saying they really hated it, just the way it was laid out, the way the tournament worked out. It wasn't really a tournament. It kind of was like play 2 games, and then the third day was like it's based on point differential, top 4 teams. A team can go undefeated, not even make a championship. It was really, really weird. But so lots of conversation about that on Twitter. Interesting conversation. My opinion, I thought it was a great tournament. I thought we got a lot of great games between high major teams, which is expected, this week. It's unfortunate because it takes away from events like Maui, the Bahamas, Battle for Atlantis. So that was a little unfortunate. But I mean, it was a great tournament in terms of bringing teams to Vegas, bringing a lot of these Power 5 teams, a lot of these teams that have a lot of hype this season so far, bringing them to one place. And we learned a lot about some of these teams, and I'm gonna get into it. One of these teams that I think we learned a lot about this past week was Kansas. Kansas went undefeated, 3-0 in the Players Area Festival without their star guard, Darren Peterson. In my opinion, this was a huge week for them. They proved that they can still compete. Like we said, even without their star guard, Darren Peterson, a guy that's expected to average, 15-20 points a game a night. It's only a freshman. But, he's out with a hamstring injury, I believe. We don't know the timetable yet. I'll get into that in the future. Bill Self had some words for that. But yeah, I think Kansas was a team where in the last episode we had mentioned didn't really know what to expect because of that Peterson injury. They had dropped games to Duke and then UNC earlier this season before the Players Era Festival. So yeah, they go into this Players Era Festival. Their 3 games. The first 2 games, Notre Dame, Syracuse won those 2 by an average margin of about 10 points. And their third game, they're 2-0. They got Tennessee, a team that had just defeated a top 5 team in the country. I still believe is one of the best teams in the country. I think Houston was a top 3 team in the country at the time last week. A team that Tennessee had just defeated Houston. So a battle of 2 undefeated teams in the Players Era, final day of the Players Era. Not the championship game, weirdly enough, but Kansas actually came up with the win, 81-76. They got some really, really great play from their supporting cast, specifically, El Marco Jackson. He was really great. He finished with 17 points. Bryson Tiller was good. Flory Badunga was a guy that was really, really great this whole tournament. Melvin Council Jr. was great. And then Trey White. Big from their entire supporting cast, Melvin Council, Flory Badunga, Trey White, and Bryson Tiller, 4 guys who are going to be a huge part of this team and a huge part into how far Kansas can go this season. Here, I got the Players Era averages right here. In 3 games, Melvin Council averaged 14.3 points, 6 rebounds, and 4 assists. Flory Badunga, 14.7, 10 rebounds, and 3 blocks on 47% shooting from the field. Trey White, 15 points, 8 rebounds, and 48% from the field, while shooting 56% from 3. And Bryson Tiller averaging 11 points, 8 rebounds, and shooting 50% from the field. So you had guys averaging 15. That's 55 points right there from those 4 guys. And that was one of our concerns, or one of the things we brought up. We really didn't know who was going to step up for this Kansas team. And boy, did they step up. And I think this was a huge week for the Jayhawks. And it really proved that, like I said, they can still compete even without Darren Peterson. Brendan made a good point in the last podcast saying they're not this dumpster fire that's going to bottom out without Peterson. They still can be able to compete. And like Brendan said, I think they can compete with anyone in the Big 12, even with the Arizona, even with Houston, even with an Iowa State, even like Brendan said, even at home in their home environment. I think they can compete with anyone in the Big 12, and they look dangerous. They got a big week this week. We'll go into that in a later segment in the podcast, but they got a big week this week, and Darren Peterson could possibly come back. We'll see. They got a game against Tuesday, against UConn, and then Saturday against Missouri. I would place my bets he will play against Missouri, but hey, you never know. Bill Self, he said that this Peterson's status is uncertain. They're just taking it day by day. He has to pass his medical tests. But hey, if he plays against UConn, I really like their chances, especially in Kansas, in Fog Allen. And then you got Missouri, a rivalry game on Sunday. I'm sorry. Hey, this team could really start to get it rolling. And that week really could define their season. That was a huge week. Moved on to another team, another Big 12 team that I was super impressed with, Iowa State. Iowa State, I think I've said it on podcasts before. I really didn't know what to make of this Iowa State team because I mean they brought back a good amount of their returnees. But I really didn't know what to expect out of this team. You know, I know they're a team that's going to want to play defense, want to slow down the pace. They're a team that doesn't really have maybe a guy that's going to dominate the game. Timon Lipsey is a really great player. They were undefeated this week. You know, they took care of business against Creighton and Syracuse, and they got an opening day win against a really good St. John's team, which is kind of got some red flags. I'll go into them in a later segment, later on in this podcast, but that's a quality win right there. And then you took care of business against Creighton and Syracuse. Syracuse, a team that was very pesky. They gave Houston a real run for their money in a previous game. But I think Iowa State, they're so well coached. I think TJ Otzelberger is one of the best coaches in the sport. He's one of the most underappreciated coaches in the sport. Just in terms of national media, I feel like he doesn't get the love that he deserves. He's been there for now 4 full seasons. He's been there to the tournament all 4 seasons, looking like a 5th season if, knock on wood, if things go to plan. But they're just a well-coached team. They are so balanced. They play defense. They don't turn the ball over. They really value possessions. I was super impressed. I think they're for sure in that top 5 range of the Big 12. We know that Big 12 is top 5, top 4 heavy, and they're within there. I think arguably they could be a top 3 team. They're the top 3 team right now in the Big 12. Of course you got Houston, Arizona. I think they're right up there with BYU. So yeah, I was super impressed with them. Milan Momcilovic, I don't know if I said that right, but he averaged 19 points, 3.7 rebounds, and shot 56% from 3 in the Players Era tournament. Really great performances. And then Joshua Jefferson, 16 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists, a block and a steal a game in the Players Era. Just really great contributions. Timon Lipsey, he got hurt. I think in the St. John's game. That's a big blow for them. They got a big game coming up again this weekend against Purdue at Purdue. We'll get into that at a later segment. But I mean, they're just a well-coached team. They don't get the love they deserve from the national media. Funny enough, I saw one of our TikTok comments because an Iowa State fan had commented like, "Please talk about Iowa State. They don't get the love they deserve." And I'm talking about them now. They truly don't get the love they deserve. This Players Era Festival, this was their first really true test. They passed the flying colors, undefeated. Yeah, be a St. John's team that, hey, I mean, they've looked a little fluky so far, but they're as talented as any team in the country. And then you took care of Creighton and Syracuse, which you're supposed to do. So yeah, I think this Iowa State team is scary. And then, like I said, they're in that upper echelon of the Big 12, and they can really make some noise this year. I believe they can, because just how well coached they are, how balanced they are, one of the best home court environments. Yeah, Iowa State is a team I was super impressed with. Sticking with the Big 12, another team that I want to talk about, Houston. I believe they entered this week at AP poll number 3. I could be wrong, but they were in the top 5 for sure. They went 2-1 in the Players Era. They won against Notre Dame and Syracuse. Syracuse, like I said, gave them a legit scare, but they dropped their game against Tennessee in the second day of the Players Era tournament. I'm not really gonna penalize Houston. I really thought it was a toss-up. We had mentioned in the last podcast episode that it's 2 teams that are going to play close games, 2 teams that want to control the pace, 2 teams want to play defense, and that's what we got. We knew it was going to be a close game. We knew it was going to be, like Brendan said, we knew it was going to be within the 5-point margin. Obviously, if you're Houston, any loss, you don't want to lose a game. But I think you saw some really good green flags that you can build upon. Kingston Flemings, I mean, he's been amazing this season as a true freshman. Against Tennessee, 25 points, 4 rebounds, and 3 assists. 10 for 15 shooting from the field and 3 for 4 from 3. He was just nails. I mean, he was just coming up with clutch bucket after clutch bucket, and it was almost enough to defeat Tennessee. I think for Houston, obviously, anytime you lose sucks. But that Tennessee team's a great team, and Tennessee, it's another team that I really didn't know what to expect coming into this season, similar to Iowa State. But they're also, I mean, say what you want to say about Rick Barnes and Marsh, but they're a well-coached team. They know their identity. They're going to play to their strengths. So going into Tennessee, they finished the tournament 2-1. Obviously, like I said, lost that final game to Kansas. Wins over Houston and then Rutgers. I mean, I was really impressed with them. I mean, Rutgers, obviously they manhandled. They took care of business. Jacoby Gillespie against Houston, 22 points, 4 assists. Not the best shooting night, 5 or 16, but I thought he had some really timely buckets. And another guy that was really great, Bishop Boswell, timely buckets, 10 points, 4 rebounds, and 3 steals, 4 for 4 from the field. I thought he had some really nice minutes off the bench. And then Nate Ament, the true freshman. In 3 games in the players era, averaged 16.3 points, 6 rebounds, almost 3 assists, a steal, and shot 40% from three in 3 games. I was really impressed with him. He's just a really long athlete, so versatile, can really do everything. So I was impressed with Tennessee. Like I said, that was a team I really didn't know what to expect coming into the season, but they really I learned a lot more about this Tennessee team, and I think it's a wide open SEC, especially Florida's looking a little iffy. I think Alabama, in my opinion, is number one team in the SEC, but Kentucky's looked iffy. I think it's a really wide open SEC, and Tennessee could be in the upper echelon. They should really take advantage of that. So another team that I want to talk about, I don't know if I was not impressed with, but St. John's, kind of touched upon it earlier. They went 1-2 in the players era. They dropped to 4-3 overall. Honestly, I was surprised that they went 1-2 because, like I mentioned, they're as talented as any team in the nation. You got Zubi Ejiofor, Bryce Hopkins, Josan Sanin, Osiah Sellers, Bryce Hopkins. I said, Ian Jackson, and you got Rick Pitino, the Godfather. They're as talented and as good of a coach as anyone in the country. So I was honestly surprised. Obviously they dropped the game to Iowa State, and then they lost to. Let me pull it up. They lost to Auburn, and then they defeated Baylor. But about this team, my notes I have just I'm not impressed with them defensively, and I think honestly that's a personnel issue. I'll have more what I want to say about this team. You gave up 82 points, 82, 81, and 85 points in this tournament. That's not going to get it done. They have been bad defensively against top 100 Torvik teams. So when they're playing competition, they haven't been great defensively. When they're playing, low major competition, they've been great. Obviously, they're taking care of business, beating teams they should beat. But in all 3 of their tests so far, they have not answered the call. Alabama, that was a shootout. They really didn't dictate the game. They had to play the game. Alabama dictated that game, and as a result, it was an up and down game. St. John's answered the bell in terms of that Alabama game. They're answering the call, but they just ran out of gas. I'm just surprised because I feel like St. John's is a team where they want to come out aggressive. They want to set the tone physically. It just seems like as of right now, they're not really setting the tone in their games. Other opposing teams are setting the tone, and that's not what I expect out of a Rick Pitino coach team. I think they'll get it fixed. Rick Pitino is a great coach. And they have the Big East has been really weak. If they don't finish top 2 in the Big East, that's a glaring red flag. But they should run through the Big East. The only big opposition in that conference is UConn. They clawed back to make it a competitive game against Iowa State in their opener. They were down by double digits at one point, but they clawed back. I think they're just a very inconsistent team right now. One game they'll get contributions from everyone. From the main contributors, Sanin, Hopkins, Ejiofor, Sellers, Jackson. But then the next game they'll only have contributions from 1 or 2 guys. That's just not going to get it done. They need to be more consistent. They need to be better defensively. They also give up a lot of offensive rebounds. They're not the greatest rebounding team, and I feel like that's a red flag that I noticed in their Alabama game. Zubi Ejiofor, if they want to play him at the 5. He's already a guy that's kind of undersized, 6'8", 6'9". You're gonna go against teams that have 7-footers, 6'11" guys. He's serviceable at the 5, and he's serviceable in terms of he would be able to spread the floor. You're able to get run a lot of good offense if he's at the 5. But in terms of crashing the glass, he's undersized and he's kind of at a disadvantage against most teams, and that makes a lot of sense. They give up a lot of offensive rebounds. They have 43% opposing offensive rebound percentage, which is 287th in the country. That's not great. They're really going to have to be better on the glass, be better defensively, and just be more consistent. I think as they play more games, they start to gel with each other. That consistency will get there. 0-3 in quad 1 games, that's not a good sign. But yeah, 4-3 overall, I think they'll get it fixed. I think Rick Pitino was a great coach, but that's not great start to the season for their expectations. A team that had really big expectations this season. And like I said, it's as talented as anyone in the country. We'll see how their season goes, and then some more thoughts about the Players Era Festival. Just some quick thoughts about some other teams. Alabama versus Gonzaga. I thought that was a super, super fun game to cap off the opening night of the Players Era Festival. This game was a lot closer than the score would suggest. I think Gonzaga won by 10 or 11 points, but Alabama was in it the entire game. We just ran out of gas. LeBaron Fallon for Alabama was great. Aiden Sherrill and Amari Allen, I thought they held their own against Gonzaga's, huge front court of Grant Meeke and Braden Huff, which is Alabama's weaknesses is their size. But I thought Amari Allen and Aiden Sherrill really held their own. Gonzaga, 5 guys in double figures. Graham Ike, Saint Superi, Tylen Grant Foster, Braden Huff, Steele Ventures. Just a really overall balanced scoring output for them. I thought Tylen Grant Foster was really great, especially down the stretch. He helped close this one out for the Zags. I think he's really starting to come along. He was a guy he had come off the bench before this Players Era Festival. Obviously he had gone through his troubles with eligibility, but I think he's really starting to come along, and he's a guy that we saw at Grand Canyon just a couple of years ago. He's a guy that could really get it going, and if Tylen Grant Foster can really start getting it going, that makes this Gonzaga team even more dangerous. And it's a team that I really feel like I'm super high on. I think they're a top 10 team in the country. Even after their loss to Michigan in the championship game, I thought Michigan was just unstoppable. I'll get into them later. But I still think they're a top 10 team in the country. I still think they're super talented. They should run through the WCC. They got some big tests coming up. I'll get into that. Really high-level game, Alabama and Gonzaga. Same thing with Alabama. Like I said, I still think they're the top dog in the SEC as of right now. I'm not penalizing them too much for that Gonzaga loss. I thought it was a battle between two top 10 teams. So Alabama will be fine. After they lost that game, they went 2-0. So they'll be all right. Another SEC team I want to talk about, Auburn. Another team that we've been tough on so far in this podcast. We've kind of given them a lot of flack. Obviously new head coach, Stephen Pearl. They lost a lot of players. Made the Final Four last year, but they lost a lot from that team. Obviously bring back a guy, Tahad Pettiford, a guy that had All-American preseason hype. He kind of was struggling before this Player Era Festival, but he really, really bounced back big time, and he was huge in the Players Era. Auburn went 2-1. That wins over Oregon and St. John's, and then lost to Michigan, which no one defeated Michigan, but defeated a quality, like I said, quality St. John's team, really talented St. John's team. And then Oregon, I'll get into them later, but that's a quality win. And like I said, Tahad Pettiford, he really looked like the guy that we saw last season. And I hope this tournament gets him back on track. Here's his players era averages: 22 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, shot 49% on 16 attempts a game, field goal attempts a game, and shot 42% from 3 on 6 attempts a game. I really think he looked a lot more aggressive, a lot more comfortable. I hope this tournament gets him back on track. His previous 5 games only averaged 11 points, 2.5 rebounds, 3 assists, and shot 29% from the field and 19% from 3. So, it's as big as a night and day change as you can get. So, I really hope he can get it going. This Auburn team is scary when he gets going. Obviously, he's number one option. He's one of the most fun players in the country. So it's great to see him get back on track. This Auburn team, they're starting to get it rolling. Obviously, their season opener, like we mentioned on previous episode, Bethune-Cookman went to like double overtime, I believe. So yeah, but then I think that Houston game really got them back on track. Only lost to Houston by like 1 point. And now he had a pretty impressive Players Era Festival. Went 2-1. They're really starting to get it rolling. And yeah, credit to Auburn. They're back in the SEC mix. After we kind of counted them out after week 1, kind of a bit of overreaction. But yeah, like I said, the SEC I think is open this year, and they're back in it. So I don't know in terms of like that upper echelon, but if they stay in that mid tier of the SEC, they'll be in the tournament. So great to see them back on track. Got a lot of fun pieces. Seton Hall is super fun too. He can draw fouls like a maniac. So good for them. Good on Auburn. And then yeah, I'm gonna go with another team that I want to touch upon was Oregon. Similar to St. John's, but I think they had a worse Players Era Festival than St. John's. Went 0-3. I think this was a really, really bad tournament for the Ducks. I was not impressed at all with them. I don't think they have enough offensive firepower on this team outside of Jackson Shelstad. They're a team with a bunch of athletes and a lot of really long, versatile guys, but those guys really don't have much offensive skill. They leave a lot to be desired offensively, especially when they're asked to force to create in the half court. They just look super clunky. Their Players Era team stats, shot 29% from 3 and only shot 40% from the field. And in their final game of the festival, they went 1 for 15 from 3 against Creighton. That's just not going to cut it, especially in Big Ten play. I thought Nate Biddle, he's been all right for them, but I don't think he's been aggressive enough. I think teams are just doubling him and they're just fronting him in the post. It's been hard to get him the ball. I know Shelstad is coming back off an injury. He's another guy similar to Pettiford. If he can get it going, that opens up a lot. I'll touch upon more about Oregon in the future, but I think Dana Allman's an elite coach. They'll get it figured out, but I don't know. It's a glaring red flag offensively because I see a lot of athletes, but I don't see a lot of offensive players. They could get away with it in terms of if they really put their foot down on the defensive end, which they could. They could win some scrappy games. They could win some really some 60 to 50 games. They could do it like that. But if they want to be a team with a higher ceiling, they need to play better offensively. And this was not a great tournament for the Ducks. Not a great tournament. And finally, to cap off our notes on the Players Era tournament, Michigan, hey, Michigan fans, we've been hard on you guys. I've been super hard on you guys. I was completely wrong on you guys in this tournament. I admit that. But just complete dominance from you guys. Not you guys are firing on all cylinders. I feel like we have seen really what your guys' ceiling is, and that's a national title contender. When everyone's playing to their potential, you guys had an 100 Torvik game score in all 3 of your Players Era games. That means you're like the number 1 team in the country, and you're beating every single team. I feel like you guys shot the lights out of the ball. This is the team that we saw in your season opener against Oakland, where you guys killed an Oakland team that gave Purdue fits actually. But Michigan's a team, in my opinion, where they have really great core players in Yaxel Lendenborg. I think Maurice Johnson's a really great player. Ade Mara, when he's playing to his potential, he's great. And Elliot Cadeau, if he can play to his potential, he's a good player. That's the big if, but he can command the ship. And they have really great. I think the thing about Michigan, when I've watched them, they have really, really elite floor spacers. Their wings, Namari Burnett, Trey McKinney, all guys that can shoot the 3. We saw that in this Players Era Festival. Michigan shot 40% from 3, 54% from the field. They shot 32 threes a game, 21 assists a game. They outscored their opponents by an average of 37 points per game. Credit to Michigan. Every single thing that we thought was alarming, we thought were their weaknesses, their turnovers, and from me personally, their bigs. I thought they really stepped up. They took care of the ball. They only turned the ball over 35 times throughout these 3 games, an average of 12 turnovers a game, which is, it's not horrible. And Elliot Cadeau, a guy that we were really concerned about his turnover rate, only had 3 turnovers this entire tournament. So props to him. Credit to Michigan. Like I said, when they're firing on all cylinders, they can beat anyone in the country. They're a national title contender when they play to their potential. And we saw that in this Players Era Festival. They really made a statement. They killed everyone that they played. So credit to them. Credit to Michigan. They played perfectly. That's all I can say. Moved on to another NTE, the Maui Invitational. My prediction was that Arizona State was going to make a surprise run to the championship in this event, and they did. They defeated Texas in their opener, and then defeated Washington State in actually a crazy game, and then just came up just short, ran out of gas against USC in the championship game. Will Odom was amazing in this tournament. He was amazing in this tournament. Had 35 points against Texas, 35 plus points against Texas. His averages this tournament were 26 points, 4 assists, shot 54% from 3, and shot 91% from the free throw line. He was getting to the line at an elite rate. Also, shout out to Anthony Pig Johnson, averaging 15 points and 2.5 steals a game while shooting 55% from the field. He was great off the bench, just a big scoring punch. I think this ASU team, they can be dangerous in the Big 12 in terms of they can make some noise, because I think that middle of the Big 12 is wide open. We just saw Cincinnati lose a bye game to Eastern Michigan. I think ASU, it's open, especially if it's a team like Cincinnati is not playing to their expectations. And a team like Kansas State, they just lost a bye game to Bowling Green last night. So I think that bottom half of the Big 12 and that middle of the Big 12 is wide open. And the Big 12 has looked as good as any conference in the country so far this season. So that's a team that can get 8, 9 bids in the tournament. If you're in that middle of the Big 12, ASU, you're in the tournament. So I think they really can make some noise in the Big 12. I'm not expecting, obviously, them to be up there with Houston, Arizona, Iowa State. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying if they can hang around the Big 12, defend home court, knock off some of those top teams like I mentioned, they could be a tournament team. And nothing's stopping them. The only 2 losses are to USC and Gonzaga. Those are not bad losses at all. They don't have a single bad loss. I think this ASU team could surprise some people this season. And hey, no one's better than Bobby Hurley with his back against the wall. So credit to this ASU squad, and they could be dangerous. So watch out for them. Some other thoughts about this Maui Invitational. Getting to USC, Seton Hall, Washington State. First with Seton Hall, they went 2-1. Kind of surprising. They defeated NC State in the opener to knock NC State into the losers bracket. Um, that was a big surprise. And NC State, everyone had them chalked as the favorite in this tournament, chalked as the champion. But the two teams that everyone thought was going to be in the championship, Texas and NC State, lost in their opening games. So Seton Hall, they defeated NC State in their opener and nearly knocked off the eventual champion USC in the second game. Only lost by like 3 points. Um, this is huge for Seton Hall. It's a team that I wasn't expecting much. I thought they were going to be the bottom barrel of the Big East. But hey, I mean, talk about another conference that is wide open, the Big East. I think based on their performance in this tournament, I mean, that can go a long way for them, especially come March if they just handle business in the Big East. They're going to have to be in that upper echelon of the conference, especially if the Big East is only like a 3-bit league. They're going to have to be in that top 5, top 4 range to be in the conversation. I mean, this is a good sign for them. You defeat NC State, you hang in there with USC, you go in 2-1, you beat Washington State. I mean, those are wins that carry over come Selection Sunday. So credit to them. Credit to them. The Big East is open, and that's a statement win, especially a conference that hasn't got a lot of statement wins so far from any teams except outside of UConn and St. John's. So they really haven't got any great wins except Baylor. But so credit to Seton Hall capitalizing on their opportunities. And then a little quick thing about Washington State. Heck of a tournament from eighth class. I mean, he had 40 points against ASU. Had a great battle against Mo Odom. His averages in these three games were 27 points, shot 58% from the field, and shot 53% from three. So he was elite. True freshman. Hoping Wazoo can keep him next year. I don't want to get into that. He can make some noise in the WCC. He was great. And now I'll get into NC State. I think this just goes back into what Brendan was saying in the last episode. It goes back to his point, which is that these multi-team events are just a logistics nightmare for programs. And can really set you back, especially for a team like NC State. Imagine, that I'm sure that trip from North Carolina to Hawaii, to Maui is not the easiest. It's not the shortest. It's probably a long flight. We saw that. I think we saw some tired legs. I think we saw some guys that, especially when it came to that last game against Texas, I think we just saw some tired legs, some guys that were just sluggish. They went 1-2. They lost to Seton Hall and Texas, only defeated Boise State. I think they just looked a step slow the entire tournament, and I'm sure, like I said, the travel, the time change definitely play a huge factor in their struggles. I think the biggest takeaway from NC State is that the biggest thing is look how they respond after this, because this could really derail your season, having a disappointing MTE. But if they respond in a good way, if they could bounce back, that'll set the tone for their season. Because we've seen teams that have a disappointing MTE and don't really bounce back. That sets the tone for their season. But I think NC State, they're a great coach team. Will Wade's a great coach. They have pieces to be in the upper tier of the ACC. They got some big games coming up. They got Auburn on the road on Wednesday, and then Kansas later this month. So their response to a disappointing Maui Invitational could really define their season. The next MT that we will talk about is the battle for Atlantis. Vanderbilt pretty much dominated this tournament, went undefeated. They're now 8-0. I'll get into them a little more. I think this Vanderbilt team that I'm falling in love with this team. I think they're an elite team. They are not getting the love they deserve. I think we've given them a lot of love. We've been super high on them on the Bubble podcast. But I mean, they passed every single analytic test, and you can argue that they haven't played anyone. But I mean, you beat a really good St. Mary's team. You beat VCU, a team that had just given NC State a run for their money on the road, and then Western Kentucky. They're no slouch either. So they've looked really great. They're what, as of Monday morning when I took my notes down, they were 4th in the net rankings, the first net rankings of the season. Top 10 in Torvik and KenPom. I mean, what's not to like about this team from an analytical standpoint too? If you haven't watched their games from an analytical standpoint, they pass with flying colors. They can really spread the floor, and they have versatile and athletic players enough that can really push the pace. Duke Miles, he's a guy that can get to the line at an elite rate. Tyler Tanner is a really fun guard. Tyler Nickel is a sharpshooter, and Devin McLaughlin is a really versatile hybrid wing and big. And my guy Frankie Collins, he's a really fun player, really fun athlete. I think we just have so many pieces that can be moved around, so many chess pieces for a great head coach in Mark Byington, who's now in his second season. I just think they have so many pieces, so many versatile pieces. They're super, super fun. They can shoot the lights out. They're super versatile. As of right now, they're a top 3 team in my opinion in the SEC. They're up there with Alabama and Tennessee. I think I really love this Vanderbilt team. I think they can hang in that upper tier of the SEC all season. I think they can hang in that top four of the SEC. You know, Kentucky's going to bounce back. You know, Arkansas, they're so talented. They're going to be there. Auburn's looking like they're turning a page, turning a corner. Missouri's tough. Georgia, they're a bit up and down, but they have a lot of firepower. Florida, I mean, defending national champions. So I think Vanderbilt, they can be within that top four of the SEC, and they're currently 17th in this week's AP poll. Behind in terms of the SEC, they're behind Bama, Florida, and Tennessee, and just one spot above Kentucky. I don't necessarily hate that ranking because you know what you're getting out of those other four programs. Even if Florida and Kentucky have looked a bit concerning at times so far this season, you know Bama's had some great wins so far this season. Tennessee, same thing. I don't know if I agree with Florida being above them, but defending national champions. Vanderbilt, I think they're starting to get the love that they deserve from the national media, but I feel like they're still kind of going under the radar. And it's a team that, I mean, they could really, I don't know their schedule off the top of my head, but they could start off the season like entering conference play undefeated. That's how good they are. That's how good their schedule, that's how, but you play teams that are in front of you and they've passed with flying colors, blown every team, blew with a really great St. Mary's team up by like 25 points in the championship game of the Battle for Atlantis. Their team stats in the Battle for Atlantis, they shot 50% from the field, 43% from three, 10 steals a game, 4.5 blocks a game, and their opponents only shot 39% from the field and 29% from three. So getting it done on the offensive end and defensive end. Just an elite team. Versus top 100 Torvik opponents, they're second in adjusted offensive efficiency, fourth in effective field goal percentage, 22% three-point percentage, and 13th in two-point percentage. Just an elite team, and I think they're getting slept on, and I think they're a team that's going to be in the top 3 for the SEC this year. I'm confident about that. The next MC that we'll get into is the Rady Children's Invitational, which surprised TCU won this MTE. After defeating Florida and Wisconsin, two really, really great teams, actually. Florida, defending national champions. I mean, they're still super talented, even though they've looked a bit concerning at times. Wisconsin, a team that we've mentioned before, a lot of offensive firepower. But TCU took care of business against them, 2-0. I think TCU was just a weird team. Obviously, they lost their season opener against New Orleans at home. That looked really concerning, but ever since then, they've looked phenomenal. The only game where they've had a Torvik game score of below 92 was their third game against Lamar. So every other game besides Lamar and New Orleans, they've looked elite, like one of the best, like a top 25, 20 team in the country. They gave Michigan a run for their money. And TCU's defense, just from the metrics, is actually like elite. Actually, they force turnovers at an elite rate, 26% of the time, 26% turnover rate, against top 100 Torvik teams, and against and top 100 opponents are only shooting 27% from three. So they force turnovers and they don't give up 3-pointers. Funnily enough, is Michigan can shoot the lights out. They don't give up threes, and then turnovers. That was one of Michigan's weaknesses, turnovers. So that kind of played into TCU's hand. But yeah, I mean, they're a really great defensive team, and credit to TCU after a rough start to their season, defeating two really respectable programs in Florida and Wisconsin. So credit to them. I mean, like I said, that middle half of the Big 12 is open, and they're back in that conversation. It seems like the Big 12 is just musical chairs. You have Kansas State, they look good one week, and then they lose to Bowling Green, and then Cincinnati look good one week, they compete with Louisville, and then they drop a game to Eastern Michigan at home. So it's just again musical chairs. TCU lose to New Orleans, Florida and Wisconsin. It just seems like it's a game of musical chairs in that bottom half, middle of the Big 12, and that'd be interesting to see come conference play. The last MTE that we get into is the Acrisure Classic. Iowa, a sleeper team that we've been on so far. They won this tournament. Brendan's super high on this team, but overall, a really nice MTE for Iowa. Nothing too crazy. They defeated Ole Miss, a team that we believe is a sleeper as well. They went 2-0, defeated Ole Miss, and then defeated Grand Canyon in the championship. Well, I think their execution on both ends of the floor, offensively and defensively, is just flawless. I think that's because they're super well coached. Ben McCollum is an excellent coach. They have a great captain at their point guard position in Bennett Sturts. They have a huge test today on Tuesday at Michigan State. Going to be a really fun matchup. I'll get into that in a future segment. It should be super fun. Two premier point guards of the sport. Jeremy Fears for MSU, and then Bennett Sturts for Iowa. I'm interested to see if Iowa can hang around in that game because obviously we know Iowa and MSU, they want to control the pace of the game. So two clashing play styles, similar play styles. That'd be really fun to watch. Two excellent head coaches as well. Ben McCollum for Iowa and then Tom Izzo for MSU. So that one should be really, really fun to kick off Big Ten conference play, already conference play. So that should be really fun. Some other Feast Week games. Michigan State versus North Carolina. Speaking of Michigan State, I think MSU is legit. I think they're bona fide top 10, top 8 team in the country. I think I had them 8th in my rankings, my top 25 rankings. They're legit. I mean, they don't necessarily have a guy that's dominant, but they're so well balanced. They have elite point guard play from Jeremy Fears, 4 guys in double figures against UNC. I think it's time to hop on the Jeremy Fears All-American train. Like I said, this team fights and is so balanced. Against UNC, they only had 10 three-point attempts. I thought that was super funny because they're a team that's gonna play to their strengths. They know their weaknesses. Tom is an elite coach. He knows what their weaknesses are, and he's gonna say, "Hey, we can't shoot the 3 ball, so we're not gonna shoot the 3 ball." It's that simple. No, on the other hand, UNC, coached by a guy that we've had our conversations about in Hubert Davis. They shot 4 for 23 from 3. They just couldn't make their threes, but they kept going to it, hoping they will eventually fall. While a team like MSU, they know their strengths, they know their weaknesses. They don't prioritize those 3-pointers, and I thought that was honestly the game right there. You saw how much of a gap there is between these two head coaches, and Hubert Davis and Tom Izzo, and that's why Tom Izzo came up with the upper hand with the victory in this game. Only 3 figures and double figures for UNC. Caleb Wilson, Henry Vasar, but I think you just need more out of others, especially Kyle Evans. Especially when we don't have Seth Trimble. Kyle Evans is a guy where you need production out of him in your backcourt. Only 4 points and 1 for 7 from the field. That's not going to cut it. That won't cut it at all against any team. But yeah, just Michigan State, they're legit. 4 guys double figures. Jeremy Fears, Jackson Kohler, Carson Cooper, Cam Ward, the freshman. This team's legit. Got a big test. Got some big tests this week. Got Iowa today at the Breslin, and then Duke this weekend at the Breslin. It's a really big week for Michigan State. We'll learn a lot more about them. We've learned a lot about them so far this season, but we're gonna learn a lot more about this team. And like I said, I think by the end of this week, I think we're gonna have conversations about Jeremy Fears being an All-American. Which, if those conversations haven't started already, they will be taking place after this week. Speaking of Duke, their game, Duke against Arkansas. My takeaways from this game is that Cam Boozer is him. Like we said, a super fun game between 2 extremely talented teams. 2, honestly, freshman-led teams. Arkansas, you got Darius Acuff, Malik Thomas, and Duke, Cam Boozer. Just 2 really talented teams. Razorbacks fought, but Boozer was just way too much. 35 points, 9 rebounds, 2 steals, 13 for 18 from the field, and 7 for 11 from the free throw line. He was elite. I mean, he looked like Paulo Banchero out there, just a wing/big hybrid that can just control the game, control the pace, kind of like a Nikola Jokic. I mean, like the guy that you can run your offense through, big you can run your offense through. I mean, he was just great. I mean, after watching that game, if you're an NBA scout, I don't know. There's any argument to not take him at least in the top 2. It's gonna be a packed top 3 of AJ DeBonsa, Darren Peterson, and Cam Boozer, but he's played as good as any of those. I mean, it's not the best performance of any of those 3 freshmen have had so far this season. And Caleb Foster had a great game too. 15 points, 8 assists, 2 for 3 from 3. He's a guy that if he has a great year this season, Duke's team ceiling that much higher. Patrick Goomba, he's a guy that I feel like I've been tough on. I haven't really said it on the podcast, but I wasn't really impressed with him in the first half in their Champions Classic game against Kansas. I thought he was kind of sloppy. His effort wasn't there. But then I feel like in the second half of that Kansas game against Champions Classic, I don't know who got into him. Maybe got a chewing out by Shire. Ever since then, the motor has been there. I think that was the biggest thing. I wasn't impressed with his motor, but the effort has been there ever since that game. And credit to him. He had some really timely shots, really timely moments against Arkansas. 11 points, 5 rebounds. I mean, he was great for them. Their 2 bigs, Boozer and Goomba, were great. For Arkansas, like I said, led by their freshmen, Darius Acuff and Malik Thomas. Acuff had 21 points, 5 assists, 4 for 8 from 3. He was great. And then Malik Thomas had 30 points and 2 steals. Kind of a rough shooting night, 5 for 15 from the field, but he's a player that kind of streaky. But when he gets going, he can get hot, but he's a wild card. Same thing for a guy like Trevon Brazile. I thought he had some bad fouls against Boozer. Him and Nick Pringle, not Pringle, like Billy Richmond, they had their hands full against Boozer. I thought they had some moments where they just kind of hands in the cookie jar, just some really just sloppy, just reaching fouls that were just avoidable. But 11 points, 11 rebounds for Trevon Brazil. I mean, they hung in there, they fought. I don't think I take away anything really too much from Arkansas. They fought against Duke, but they got some big tests this week. They got Louisville. Yeah, Arkansas, I don't think they really haven't had any statement wins yet, but they've been close. Against Michigan State, they were close on the road. Yeah, and now in Duke, it was close. This week is a big opportunity for Arkansas to get those statement wins. And finally, to cap off our feast week in terms of our game recap talk, UConn versus Illinois. We had mentioned before in our preview that two teams, super, super fun offenses, two balanced teams. Malachi Smith. This is the Malachi Smith game. 14 points, 9 assists, 3 for 3 from the three-point line. Alex Karaban, 12 points, 9 rebounds, 3 blocks. Eric Ryba, he's been really impressive, especially with Terrace Reed coming back from injury. 8 points, 7 rebounds, and 2 blocks. But overall, a nice bounce back win for the Huskies, especially after their loss last week to Arizona at home. For Illinois, not much contribution offensively beside Colin Boswell and Tomislav Ivicevic. I thought Merkovich and Stojakovic need to be a lot better. So overall, a rough shooting night for Illinois, a team that you expect to shoot the lights out, just was cold. Boswell at 25 points and 9 rebounds, 8 for 16 from the field. Tomislav Ivicevic, 11 points and 10 rebounds. And that's a team that shot 6 for 29 from 3, 21% from 3. That's not going to cut it. Yeah, but UConn, like we said, could be one of the best starting fives in the country. Arguably the best starting five in the country, but nice bounce back win for UConn. And I think for Illinois, I think obviously you beat Texas Tech earlier this season at home, but I mean, you expect more, but I still think they're a top 20 team in the country. But they need more consistent output, and they'll be all right. They have a lot of balanced pieces, but that wasn't really the best performance from them. Keep it like that. Next segment, I'm going to pick my team of the week. I'm kind of going different. Obviously, I think the cop-out answer would be Michigan. That's the easy answer. But my team of the week is Kansas. I think, like I mentioned before already in the beginning of the episode, I was super impressed with Kansas. I think Kansas is a team that I learned a lot more about after this week than any other team in the country. I think, like I said, we learned a lot more that they can hang, especially without Darren Peterson. We learned that their supporting cast can be relied on. So yeah, my team of the week is Kansas. I was super impressed. Obviously, we know they're a well-coached team in Bill Self. I think we learned that Kansas' ceiling is higher than than you would have thought after that UNC and Duke game. So yeah, really great bounce back week for them. I think this could really catapult their season, especially if you get Darren Peterson back this weekend, potentially against Missouri. Hey man, this team is dangerous. And for my game of the week, I went with Duke versus Arkansas. I think, like I already mentioned, two very talented teams. We got a complete masterclass from Cam Boozer. That's my game of the week. I think Boozer just responded every single time. He answered every call. Just a high level game between two elite teams. And yeah, the first net rankings came out on Monday. I think I had no real surprises in the top 10. Michigan, Duke, Purdue, Vanderbilt, Gonzaga, Arizona, Iowa State, UConn, Louisville, Michigan State were all in the top 10. No real surprises, in my opinion. I guess some people might be surprised with Vanderbilt, but I think, like I said, it's just matching the stats with the eye test. They've been elite. All the analytics will show that they've been elite. But I think Iowa State is another team that's similar to Vanderbilt. They're kind of been a sleeper. And it's good. I think overall it's good to see that Vanderbilt and Iowa State are that high. It's hard to tell because it's so early in the season, but it's a good sign for those teams. And Vanderbilt and Iowa State, two teams that I've really talked about so far in this episode that really should make them noise in their conferences in the Big 12 and SEC. So good for them. Some notable teams that I want to get into. Kentucky was at 15, Iowa at 16, LSU at 19, Butler at 21, Florida at 33, Colorado at 46, and Baylor at 67. In terms of Kentucky at 15, I think this overall is a good sign if you're a Kentucky fan because despite some bumps in the road, they're still within the top 15 team according to the net rankings. So yeah, just confirming what we know that this Kentucky team is going to be okay. They're going to get reinforcement back in Jaden Quintons, hopefully soon. But they're still so talented. They have a great head coach in Mark Pope. They'll be all right. Iowa at 16. confirming what we've known. They're a sleeper team. They're a team that executes at a high level. LSU at 2019. Sorry, 19. Hey man, LSU. They won the Emerald. They won the MTE, the Emerald Coast Classic after defeating Drake and DePaul. I think they're a super fun squad. They're 30th in adjusted offensive efficiency, 9th in effective field goal percentage, 2nd in 2-point field goal percentage, and 18th in free throw rate. So they've been elite offensively. I guess the one downside is they haven't faced a top 100 squad. They do have some big tests later this week and next week in Texas Tech and SMU before really diving into conference play in January. They're a super fun team. They can shoot the lights out. Elite offensively. They're a team to watch out for. Butler at 21. That's super interesting because I think that's kind of really saving the Big East. We mentioned Seton Hall. The Big East is wide open besides UConn and St. John's. Creighton has looked really iffy. So I think Butler at 21 just kind of saving the Big East from purgatory. Florida at 4, and then Florida at 33. I think that's super interesting. They haven't looked really right quite yet. I mean, their guards need to step up. I'll keep it at that. I'll go into them later on in this episode. Colorado at 46. That is really interesting. I feel like they've gone a bit under the radar. They're currently undefeated, 8-0. They just defeated another undefeated team in Cal Baptist. Really interesting game, but they won their MTE actually, and they defeated Washington in the championship game. Washington's a quality squad. I mean, they can make some noise. I don't really know what to expect at Colorado, but we'll learn more about them soon, and especially in conference play, but that's a good sign for them. And then Baylor at 67, I feel like is surprising, especially after I thought they played well in the Players Era Festival. But like I said, it's early on. The net rankings are still a work in progress. It's early on, a lot of season left, a lot of basketball to be played. So yeah, those are my first thoughts about the net rankings so far. I have a little fun segment we're going to play. I'm going to name the first word that comes to mind when I name these teams that have been a little disappointing or shown some red flags, in my opinion, so far this season. St. John, I wrote down defense. This word comes to mind because their defense against top 100 teams has been atrocious so far. They gave up 103 points to Alabama, 83 points to Iowa State, and 81 points to Baylor, and 85 points to Auburn. They're going to need to figure out on the defensive end. They're extremely talented. They're a team that, I said they're as talented as any team in the country. And then they have been great offensively. The metrics have shown that they've been one of the best offensive teams in the nation. But if they're going to really want to reach some of their lofty expectations they had this preseason, they're going to need to get it figured out defensively. And like I said before, I think the main culprit of their issues is personnel related. You're calling upon guys. You're depending on guys who don't really have defensive reputations to become that minimum average level defenders. And Osiah Sellers, Ian Jackson, Joseph Shannon. It's hard because you need those guys to overperform defensively, but you also need them to perform offensively too. So you're gonna have to sacrifice the performance on one on the floor, and I don't know if any of those guys really want to, but we'll see. I mean, we're gonna have to. They have to get it figured out because their opportunities for some quality wins in non-conference are kind of fading quickly, especially with the Big East looking very weak to begin the season. Against top 100 teams offensively, they're 10th in adjusted offensive efficiency, 20th in free throw rate, and 52nd in effective field goal percentage. So they're pretty elite offensively, but they just got to get it figured out defensively. And once they get it figured out defensively, I think they really start to figure it out and be the St. John's that we know. Florida, the first word that came to mind for me was guards. Xavier Lee and Boogie Flan, they're two guards, their backcourt duo they brought in from the transfer portal. Xavier Lee from Princeton and Boogie Flan from Arkansas. Those two guards are shooting a combined 23% from three so far this season. That is not good at all. That is very bad. Florida's front court is great, is among one of the best front courts in the country, arguably the best front court in the country. And they need help. Thomas Houck is playing like an All-American, and I would really hate to see his play go to waste due to poor guard play, which is kind of weird because Florida had amazing guard play last season, and Will Richard, Walter Clayton, elite guard play, and Elijah Martin, but this has been the opposite. Urban Klobzar, he's been the only productive rotational guard for Florida this season, averaging 10 points and shooting 38% from three. I think even just average guard play from Boogie Flan and Xavier Lee would raise Florida's ceiling significantly, and you can't waste an All-American season from Thomas Houck. You can't waste the talent of Alex Condon. You can't waste the talent of Ruben Chenelu. They need their guards to step up. I know Xavier Lee had a bounce back game against Providence, but They really need them to step up if they want to be competing for Final Fours, national championship. They have the front court to do it, but they need the guards to step up. Oregon, my one word was offense. I think the Ducks' offense has been putrid this season. Only 3 players for the Ducks with at least a minimum of 10 three-point attempts are shooting above 30% from 3. Hopkins, Nate Biddle, and Jackson Shelstad. This offensive performance is just not going to cut it, especially in the Big Ten. They have a huge week coming up at home today, Tuesday, against USC, and at UCLA on the road on Saturday. I think Oregon's calling card this season is going to be on the defensive end, but if they don't get stops, they don't have the firepower, they don't have the skill offensively to match teams. And that's a glaring red flag. In the Players era, they shot 29% from 3, 40% from the field, and like I said, 1 for 15 from 3 against Creighton. That is horrible. They need more out of their guys offensively. They need more out of Nate Biddle. They need more out of Jackson Shelstad. They got to get it fixed. And that offense looked really, really bad in the Players Era tournament, but they had some opportunities to really right the ship, get a big win against USC, get a big win against UCLA, and then they could really get their season going back in the right direction. Creighton, another really intriguing team. My one word for them is identity. I think for this Creighton team, this season is going to be about finding their identity. You lose nearly your entire core makeup of last season. A guy who's was there for 5 seasons, Brian Kalkbrenner, an All-American. You lose Stephen Ashworth, your point guard. You lose Jemiah Neal, a steady wing starting. I think they're just going to go through a transitional phase, and we're kind of seeing that right now. It's pretty much an entirely new team, despite a handful of returners. They've been pretty pedestrian against top 100 teams. Gonzaga, Baylor, Iowa State, and Oregon. They have 6 players averaging at least 8 points per game. Josh Dix, Blake Harper, Jason Green, Owen Freeman, Nick Graves, Hudson Greer. So they have the balance to do it, to really compete. But I think it's going to be a lot of growing pains for this Creighton team. A lot of just finding their identity. When you lose a guy like Kalkbrenner, that kind of like a restart. Like I've said before, the Big East, it's looked really weak. Creighton's a team that should be a shoo-in for the tournament. They got some opportunities, This week they got a game against Nebraska, a rivalry game on Sunday. That pretty much is their only opportunity left for a big win before conference play starts, so they got to get it going. Some stats to back up their pedestrian play so far. Against top 100 teams, they're 129th in adjusted offensive efficiency, 122nd in effective field goal percentage, 127th in three-point percentage, 143rd in two-point percentage. So, like I said, they've been average, mediocre. So, they got to get it going, but I think they will. Going to be some growing pains. They got to get it figured out. NC State, my one word is rebound, both literally and figuratively. I already elaborated my thoughts on NC State's performance in Maui, but I chose the word rebound because I believe how they rebound after a lackluster Maui Invitational will really define their season. I think they had a real stinker against Seton Hall, and then they rebounded against Boise State, but they dropped their final game against Texas. I thought they were just lethargic. They were just burnt out. Yeah, give up 102 points, them tired legs. Like I said, figuratively, literally, and rebounding, they're pretty average in terms of offensive rebounding. They don't really have a traditional big man, and they kind of lack interior presence down low, in my opinion. Van Allen Lubin, he's their closest resemblance to a big, but he's 6'8", so they don't really have like a guy 6'10", 6'11". He's been decent. He's been grabbing boards, but they don't really have a guy to really snag those offensive rebounds, get you extra possessions. So that's something to monitor. I think NC State, I think they'll be okay. Wade's a really great coach. And their offensive peripherals actually against top 100 teams are really, really good. Against top 100 teams, they're 8th in adjusted offensive efficiency, 11th in effective field goal percentage, and 6th in three-point percentage. So they're an elite offensive team. They kind of just got to get it figured out defensively. And I think they got to get the rebounding figured out, because if they can out-rebound teams, that's winning more possessions for your offense. So, but yeah, how they rebound after this really disappointing Maui Invitational, I think that really set the tone for this season, and I'm confident that they will rebound because Will Wade's a great coach and they have the personnel to do it. Texas Tech, my one word for them is help. On Sunday, Texas Tech only defeated Wyoming at home by 4 points. The Red Raiders have only 2 consistent offensive players, Christian Anderson and JT Toppin, 2 All-American level players, 2 All-Conference players. But they need offensive production from the rest of their team. Juan Watts and Donovan Atwell are really the only other players that can give you offensive production. They're the only 2 offensive players that are averaging double digits scoring wise. But both of these players have been wildly inconsistent. Atwell has scored a season high of 22 and 19 points in the Red Raiders' first 2 games of the season, but since then has followed up those 2 performances, only 3 points on the road at Illinois. In their last 5 games, he's averaged only reached double digits, scoring once. He's a guy that I think needs more shots and more touch the game because he's an elite shooter. He's shooting 44% from 3, but that's purely his role. He's a catch and shoot guy. His 3-point attempt rate, which is kind of funny, is 93%, which means he shoots 93% of his shots this season are threes, which is kind of funny. He's purely a catch and shoot guy, purely just going to shoot from beyond the arc. Kind of how my game was when I played basketball. But another guy that they need offensive production from is Juan Watts. He's been super inconsistent this season. His best game of the season came against Illinois. We had 21 points, but in the 5 games since, he's followed that up by scoring 10, 8, 0, 12, and 19 points. So the only thing he's consistent at is being inconsistent. He's really good at drawing fouls, getting to the line, but he isn't a great shooter either. Really hinders their Texas Tech spacing. The Red Raiders have dropped to 42nd in Torvik after starting the season 28th. That's 14 slots they've dropped this season, and they've fallen just in Torvik's rankings in the Big 12. If Texas Tech really wants to get back in the tournament and make a deep run, they absolutely need consistent offensive production from their supporting cast outside of JT Toppin and Christian Anderson. That's why I said help. They need help. So getting into our next segment, I'm going to preview a really loaded slate this week. Big Ten Conference play, it starts this week. Got some quick thoughts about it. Michigan State and Iowa. That should be a really fun game today, Tuesday. I kind of really touched on it earlier, but this should be a really fun game between two of the most well-coached and disciplined teams in the country, and 2 programs that consistently execute their game plans at a high level. MSU is 14th and Iowa is 21st in Torvik. Really elite teams. Torvik projects a 70-64 MSU win. It's going to be a very slow and methodical game. I'm super excited to see the 2 point guards, Jeremy Fierce for MSU and Bennett Sturts for Iowa. Besides Braden Smith, I can't think of 2 other point guards who really command the game like these 2. It should be really fun, and I'm looking forward to it. Some high-level basketball to start off the Big Ten, start off the month of December. Speaking of the Big Ten, USC, they have a big week this week. They got Oregon and Washington, the 2 Pacific Northwest schools of the Big Ten. They got, USC obviously coming off a Maui Invitational Championship. They're led by their big 3, Chad Baker-Mazara, Rodney Rice, and Ezra Asar, who are averaging a combined 47 points per game. Rodney Rice got injured in their game against Seton Hall and missed the championship game against ASU. So I'm not quite sure the severity of his injury and his status for this week, but that will be a really big loss for the Trojans, especially entering Big Ten play. Regarding their outlook this week, they go to Oregon, and even though I have my concerns about the Ducks, it's still a really tough place to play in. It's a tough road trip. Harvick projects a 79-78 USC win. I mean, it's pretty much a toss up. I think I would lean. I don't know. It's a toss up to me in my opinion. And then their final game of the week on Saturday is at home against Washington. I think USC should be able to handle business, and Torvik thinks so as well. They project an 83-74 USC win. But man, don't sleep on this UW. Don't sleep on the Huskies. They're definitely a team that can't be taken lightly. They're another really volatile team that play up and play down to their competition. So best believe they're going to play up for this one. Desmond Claude and Wesley Yates both make their returns to USC. And Washington has really gotten some good contributions from Kamari Peterson and Zoom Diallo. Hannes Steinbach, a true freshman big man, is a double-double machine. He's missed the last couple of games with an injury, so his status is up in the air. But this could be and could be a really fun game between 2 former Pac-12 schools. USC at home, so they have the home field advantage, but this Washington team has a lot of firepower, so don't sleep on this Washington team. And my final thought on the Big Ten is poor Rutgers. They got Purdue and Michigan this week to begin Big Ten play. I mean, come on, like a Purdue team that is arguably one of the best teams in the country, and then you got Michigan that just blew the doors off everyone in the Players era. Just poor Rutgers. I mean, they were the punching bag in the Players era festival alongside UNLV and Maryland, and now they're rewarded with playing Purdue and Michigan to open up Big Ten conference play. I mean, poor Rutgers. That's all I gotta say. And then another game is another team. Kansas has a huge week this week. They got UConn and Missouri. Like I said, the Jayhawks really revitalized their season after an excellent Players Era festival where they went 3-0, got wins over Notre Dame, Syracuse, and Tennessee. With no Darren Peterson, their supporting cast stepped up really big. Peterson's status for Tuesday against UConn is up in the air, but even if he's still out, I wouldn't count out Kansas in this one. Like I said, I've already mentioned before how highly I think of UConn, but with this game being in Fog Allen, I do like the Jayhawks' chances to pull off. I don't know the upset, but to pull this one out. And if they do, that'd be a huge addition to their resume. And like I said, their supporting cast has really stepped up. Flory Badunga, Melvin Council, Trey White. They all had really great Players Era festivals. I think they could win this game against UConn. And later on this week, they got a rivalry game against Missouri on Sunday. That one is is technically at home, but a neutral site. Is going to be played in Kansas City, but Missouri has looked really good so far. They're currently undefeated at 8-0, but they haven't really been tested yet. The toughest opponent they faced is Minnesota, so this is their first real test. But it should be a good one. A matchup between two heated rivals. And I think if Darren Peterson were to return this week, he would return for this game. So I lean Kansas. I don't really know what to make of this Missouri team quite yet. Haven't really played any competition quite yet. Whereas Kansas, they dropped a couple games against Duke and UNC, but they looked great against Tennessee. They looked great in their past 3 games in the Players Era. So I think I will lean Kansas. Especially, I think Darren Peterson could return for this game. But Kansas has a big opportunity this week. If they go undefeated this week, they're right back there. They could be a top 10 team in the next 8 people. So that's it for Kansas. And moving on to another blue blood, Duke. They have a big week as well. They got Florida and Michigan State. Huge week for the Blue Devils. Florida at home today on Tuesday, and then MSU on Saturday. I know the MSU game has gotten a lot of attention, rightfully so, but the Florida game, in my opinion, is really intriguing. You got 2 surefire All-Americans on the court in Cam Boozer for Duke, and then Florida, Thomas Houck for Florida. I think Duke is more talented and has more depth, but Florida, unlike Arkansas last week, has the front court to match up with Cam Boozer and Patrick Goomba. Florida has 3 legit guys they can throw out those 2 in Thomas Houck, Alex Condon, and Ruben Chenalou. Duke's going to need their 2 guards. Duke's going to need their guards to step up, mainly Isaiah Evans, Caleb Foster, and Dame Sarr. Dame Sarr, a guy who I'm really high on. But he didn't have the best game against Arkansas. Like I said, Duke has a depth and talent advantage, but don't count out the Gators. They have the size to match up with this Duke team, especially a Duke team that wants to play through their bigs. It's at Duke, so I think I would give Duke the benefit of the doubt, but I mean, this is going to be a really fun game. Thomas Houck versus Cam Boozer, that's a really fun matchup. I think they should be guarding each other, I hope so, but that should be a fun one. Regarding Duke MSU, I think I'm going to hold my thoughts on this one. Hoping we're going to get another episode sometime this week, so we'll be able to get our resident MSU fan on the bubble, Brendan, to talk about this game, what he thinks about this game for MSU, but that one should be a really fun game. Another blue blood, sticking with the blue bloods, Kentucky. They have a huge week. Their lineup is North Carolina and Gonzaga. In my opinion, I think this week's going to be a litmus test on how good this Kentucky team is. UNC at home today on Tuesday, and you play Gonzaga at a neutral site in Tennessee on Friday. These are the Wildcats' first real big tests since their stinker against Michigan State in the Champions Classic. I'm expecting them to hopefully play with their hair on fire and to really up their intensity. Against UNC, they're going to have to be able to contain their front court, especially Caleb Wilson. If they can do that, they have a good chance of winning. Against Gonzaga, this will be their toughest test of the week, in my opinion. Mickey and Braden Huff, they're one of the best front courts in the nation, and Tyron Grant Foster, like I said, is beginning to find his groove. I think Kentucky's going to face 2 excellent front courts this week. We got Henry Vasar and Caleb Wilson for UNC. And then, like I said, Braden Huff and Graham Ike for Gonzaga. So they got their hands tied. Malachi Moreno is going to have his hands tied. Brandon Garrison. But with no JQ, got their hands full. But This is an excellent opportunity for the Wildcats to really steer their season in the right direction. If they go 1-1 or 2-1, even if one win, I know Kentucky fans would like to go 2-0, but I think one win would kind of help get their season back on track. Could help revitalize, lift their spirits up, and say, hey, like we're Kentucky, we should be competing with these top dogs. But yeah, really intriguing game. And speaking of Kentucky's rival, Louisville, they got a big week too. Yeah, Arkansas and Indiana this week. I know they got two really fun games. Um, at Arkansas on Wednesday, and then they got Indiana on Saturday in Indianapolis. I think it's a neutral site game, but pretty much a de facto home game. I'm intrigued by that Indiana game. I think from an offensive standpoint, it's super fun. I mean, both teams can shoot the lights out and are super efficient. Each team has two players who are shooting above 40% from three. For Indiana, Tucker DeVries and Lamar Wilkerson. And for Louisville is Ryan Combo and Liam McNeely. Just elite shooting, elite offense. In terms of their stats, Louisville ranks 4th in adjusted offensive efficiency, 24th in effective field goal percentage, 37% from three, and they're 20th in 2-point percentage at 61%. For Indiana, they're 27th in adjusted offensive efficiency, 20th in effective field goal percentage, 22nd in their lowest turnover percentage, so they take care of the ball, and they're 50th in 3-point percentage, shooting 38% from three, and 17th in 2-point percentage, shooting 61% from two. So just elite offenses, fireworks. I think Louisville, they looked really great this season, but Indiana in Indianapolis, I don't know if I can count out Indiana, but should be a super fun one. Two really high level offenses. Could be fireworks. Two teams that want to push the pace. So if you love offense, that's the game for you. And then the first game of the week, Arkansas. Another really intriguing game. I think in terms of more of the talent on the court, you got three potential first round picks on the court. In Louisville's Michael Brown. Arkansas got Darius Acuff and Malik Thomas, so that should be super fun. Arkansas is always a wild card. We've already said that Arkansas is a team that's going to play up and going to play down into the competition. I think this could get scary for Louisville in terms of this game being at Arkansas, and for those two freshmen, that helps in their favor with the home crowd. I think for me, this is a toss-up. Torvik projects an 83-82 Louisville win. This should be a fun one, just like the Indiana game, but just high-level hoops all around for Louisville this week, and they got a big week. It should be a really fun week. Lots of high-level hoops this week. And the last game we're gonna preview, last thing this episode. It's been a long episode, so appreciate everyone for tuning in, sticking with it. Iowa State versus Purdue. To me, this is the under-the-radar game of the week, at least in terms of the marquee games of the week. Purdue has a great argument to be the number one team in the nation, and Iowa State is coming off an undefeated Players Era Festival. Iowa State, like I said, super underrated and shouldn't be taken lightly. Even if they're without their star guard, Tamin Lipsey, if you can't go against Purdue. Joshua Jefferson, Milan Momcilovic, Blake Buchanan, Killian Torre. That's an excellent supporting cast who were all really great in the Players Era Festival. And like I said, TJ Altenberger is a great head coach, but I just don't know if I can pick against Purdue, especially in Purdue. At Mackey, I think Purdue, their starting five can go toe-to-toe with any team in the country. Braden Smith is the best point guard in the sport. I think I would roll with the Boilermakers. I don't like to make picks, but I'm going with the Boilermakers in this one. But should be a really fun one between two elite teams. Just going by stats, Purdue, 1st in adjusted offensive efficiency, 16th in effective field goal percentage, 7th in offensive rebound rate, 5th in 3-point percentage, and Iowa State, 20th in adjusted offensive efficiency, 19th in effective field goal percentage, 9th lowest turnover percentage, so they take care of the ball, 22nd in 2-point percentage, 2nd in opponent turnover percentage, so they force turnovers, and 7th in their opponent's adjusted offensive efficiency, so their defense has been elite. This should be, like I said, this should be a really fun game between two elite teams, two well-coached teams. Should be a fun one. Should be a fun week of college basketball. Appreciate everyone for tuning in. Watch some college basketball this week. We're finally getting those high major versus high major matchups. Yeah, here's to a great week of college basketball.